Hello, my name is Duncan Iaria, and I'm an interface engineer here at SOLTECH. And today I'd like to talk about React Native and React Native app and how we use those here at SOLTECH and why we use them and what they can do for you. So that being said, first I want to touch on React.js. Now React is a popular JavaScript framework that is used on the web a lot. Facebook developed it, and that's what they use for a lot of their web application. And the way it works is, from a very high level, you write all these components that do different things and get data and display that data. And then those components have a virtual DOM here. There's a level of abstraction right here. So the big part here is this is the abstraction layer. And that virtual DOM actually informs the real DOM, or document object model, on the browser how it should look. So what that means is when there's a change in a component, it's caught here in the virtual DOM. This looks through all the differences of the things that are happening, and it says, oh, these two things are different. And what that does is it pushes out that single change to the browser, so only that element updates, rather than having the whole page refresh when you get just one value change or anything like that. The reason that I bring React up is because that's what powers React Native. And the real core thing is this abstraction layer again. Now we call it the bridge in the case of React Native, but essentially what's happening is we're using React JavaScript and we're putting it into this abstraction layer, and we're having it export out to different to code that can be used by different native platforms. So that would be iOS or Android, and I believe there's even a Windows Phone version that will work. So what's really cool about this is now we can have our interface engineers, which generally use JavaScript to create front ends here at SOLTECH, and we can actually have them make iOS apps and Android apps without having to have a team dedicated to each one specifically. So we don't need a team of Swift programmers and people that know Objective-C to work on this app, while a team that knows Java has to work on this app. We can actually have JavaScript developers, the same team, work on both apps. And that's really handy. And that's how we use React Native to do that. However, with React Native, you still have to manage your different builds. So what I mean by that is if you want to deploy it onto an iPhone, you're still going to need Xcode, and you're still going to need to compile it and build your project with Xcode. And same with Android. You're going to need Android Studio, and you're going to need Android Studio to build it out with it. However, there has been something new that has come along called Expo. And I'll write that down so you can look at it later. But Expo is a software development kit, or an SDK, which essentially manages a lot of that stuff for you. It's a layer on top of React Native, and it will actually build out your code, and it can deploy it locally to your iOS or your Android devices. You can actually host your code through their servers, and you can share a link, and somebody can download your app through the Expo app, which is an iOS or Android app, and it will display through there, so you can share very easily. And finally, when you're actually ready to deploy your app, Expo will build out IPAs, the files that you need for iOS deployment, or APKs, the Android equivalent. It will actually build those out for you, send them to you, and then you can send those to the Apple Store or the Android Store, the Google Play Store, and then you'll have an actual native running app. Now, I will mention that there is a little bit of a difference between the React code and React Native code, but a lot of that is all in the UI layer and the view layer. And just to talk about that very briefly, a good example is that in React, generally you can just write a div, put some text in it, and that's it, right? However, because we don't have divs, we don't have h1 tags, we don't have p tags, because we're not targeting a browser anymore. We're targeting Android and iOS, and these each have their own implementations for those things. So we use components that React Native actually supplies for us. So we'll use a view, and this is kind of a generic component which will take and render things, whatever you put into it. And then we would put a text component within that that says, you know, whatever you wanted it to say, and then you close those out. And so that's really the only, well, that's not the only difference, but that's the major difference. Also, a lot of the layouts with React Native depend on Flexbox, because you don't really have as many controls over height and widths and the browser window, since there is no browser window. Other than that, though, if you have a developer that is well versed with React and they get started on a React Native project, they're not going to have a lot of trouble. It's not going to be that much different for them. The code is very much similar. If you're familiar with React, you'll be able to hit the ground running with React Native. And that's it. So check it out if you want to know more information. There is, you can watch the rest of my talk on YouTube. Thanks.